This process allows you to have an introspective, deeply healing experience to open you up to be manifesting from your soul and manifesting from literally your authentic, worthy self. From To Be Magnetic, this is the Expanded Podcast with your host, Lacy Phillips. As the leading destination for neural manifestation, we dispel the woo-woo in order to help you create real, tangible results based on neuroplasticity, psychology, epigenetics, and energetics. Our goal is to normalize the practice of manifestation and empower you to get into the driver's seat of your life in order to manifest the experiences, relationships, and things that most align with your authenticity. Part of our manifestation process entails expanding past your limiting subconscious beliefs. Therefore, by tuning into this podcast with interviews from experts, thought leaders, spiritual teachers, scientists, and those with neural manifestation success stories, you're starting the process of expanding your subconscious in order to see to believe that anything you desire is possible. And by pressing play, the process begins.
Hey TBM community, it's Amanda Blair, and I wanted to share the story of how my client manifested her partner that is her fullest by closing the door on an unavailable partner. When I first saw this client, she was on her way out from a very unavailable relationship, but was having a very hard time detaching and fully walking away. She knew this relationship wasn't what she wanted because the other person was involved in another relationship. And she knew that ultimately wouldn't lead to what she wanted, but the attachment was getting the best of her. So our first step and what we first worked on the first few months together was really understanding and building awareness around her attachment style, helping her become aware of all the ways in which that was playing out in her life, breaking down her specific wounding, where the patterning was coming from, why that patterning was so intoxicating, and digging it down to its roots, and shone a light on where we could really focus the reprogramming to get her to step more into her worth and begin to feel confident and secure enough to walk away more fully and really start the process of shutting the door. The workshops I had her work through in the beginning were the foundation workshops, Inner Child, which really helps a lot with breaking down the attachment and starting to heal those wounds and reprogram. Shadow for a lot of the shadowy things that were popping up for her. And then we worked a lot with the reinforcing DIs. I like the reinforcing deservingness and abundance, but also the authentic and magnetic self to really remind her and get her in that space of that full deservingness and that full sense of worth after she had done a lot of reprogramming. Of course, when she started to shut the door on the unavailable relationship and began to pull this person she had on her pedestal off the pedestal, the test came in, and the test came in through the actual partner who was unavailable. They wanted to come back in full force, but because she had built so much awareness, because she had done a lot of reprogramming, she was able to really take the lessons and move forward. She kept the door slightly open for a little bit, but we worked on her boundaries and specifically her boundaries with work, which was really helpful because she was allowing people in work to step over her boundaries and to take advantage, just like she was doing in relationship. And shining the light in this new area helped her build even more trust within herself and step into more worth to not only up level in the way that she was handling her work relationships and now hold new strong boundaries, feeling very confident in them, but giving her the confidence and security to finally fully close the door on this unavailable partnership. And she felt so proud. Then she was tested one last time when she saw the unavailable person out and about. She did not engage. She did not go up to and talk. She did not reach out after. She felt so powerful. It rattled her, but she still felt in her power. She felt secure knowing what she wanted. She knew that wasn't going to lead anywhere good. So she took herself out of the situation completely and fully passed the test. I was so proud. Closing the door on the unavailable relationship was an important step for her to welcome in a new partner because that unavailable partner was taking up a lot of space in her life energetically. And she felt very attached to that. So she did not have any new space to welcome someone in. So that door had to be fully closed and she had to feel really good about walking completely away from the door to allow that new space for her new partner to come in. After taking time to really integrate and move through different up levels and different integration periods, she felt open to start dating. She met a person through a work connect that was actually a friend, and they got to know each other as friends. He respected all her boundaries. She was able to communicate her needs. She was able to communicate her boundaries in a whole new way. And then eventually, after getting to know each other as friends, they realized they had feelings for one another and the relationship bloomed. She feels so safe, so secure within herself. So she feels so safe and so secure within this relationship now. She's able to communicate her boundaries and she is so over the moon to be in a new, secure, and fully available relationship. I'm so proud of this client and all the work she did. And I hope that her story inspires you to do the same. And if you are wanting to work through any similar issues, I would love to connect over a session. Use code MANIFEST100 to receive $100 off your coaching session. We're using that code all through August and you can book out for the rest of the year. And now the episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Expanded. So excited. You guys absolutely loved our Best in Class Money episode that we aired last month. And since we have so many new Pathway members after our sale, it's a refresher, good point in the year where people are starting to craft their list to prepare for their manifestation practice for the rest of 2021. We decided to do a best-in-class manifestation. So we pulled all of our best content, really covering our neural manifestation process and also all of the tips and tricks to really understand how to navigate this work when you're first starting out, how to really get back to basics and commit to that work, to show up regularly, and to be the motivation to get back on your manifestation practice when maybe you've fallen off your routine or whatever it may be. So I know you guys will love this one. We have Dr. Tara, Lacy, TBM Coaches, supported questions. We're really covering it all in this one, and we hope you enjoy. You are manifesting whether you want to or not, might as well get into the driver's seat. Manifestation is calling in and receiving whatever it is that you want in life. We manifest from our deep-rooted subconscious beliefs as the universe's entire intention is for us to grow into our most whole, worthy, authentic selves.
You know, when I always say that there's like a trifecta that's happening at the same time in order to manifest, it's unblocking, expanding, and passing tests or, being in your worth. Those three things have to be in motion to be manifesting. That's what's happening energetically. Here, we're trying to provide a really solid step-by-step approach that's incredibly accessible. And it's rooted, again, in truly changing your subconscious and your brain, as well as having the support through understanding the psychology of how you work so that you can get to that very flowy place.
I've heard a lot of celebrities recently, like Drake, Big Sean, even Kanye talked about it on the Joe Rogan episode, is manifesting. And it's really interesting hearing these different concepts of manifesting and how people are sort of defining manifesting and hitting their goals, right? Because when you hear some of these bigger figures, even like Jim Carrey, talking about manifesting their reality, it's trending on TikTok now. People are instantly manifesting things. And so it's really kind of blown up during this time of introspection because people are wanting to achieve their goals. They're wanting to hit that next marker. And what better way than have things happen through manifesting and working with the universe and all of these things. But I think that's kind of what brought us to creating this branch, neural manifestation, to sort of differentiate between what's out there and sort of common misconceptions and really root it back to neuroscience, psychology, epigenetics, and show sort of the science behind manifesting. It's not the woo-woo. It's not think positive, get into the vibration, spiritual bypass, law of attraction that so many people have thought for so long.
Often the representation we see of manifestation can be the person on a beach living their greatest life, talking about like, let me show you how to be a goddess and manifest too. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, but it really, again, doesn't look at the root issues of why somebody isn't manifesting. There's this misconception in manifestation that people come into it and they're like, I want the yacht and I want the home in Malibu or whatever. Like that was one of mine. And these very superficial things to fill a void that's inside. And anybody who's doing this work really understands that once you get going, you've come to the wrong place if you've come for a quick fix, which we call spiritual bypass.
That's why if you put a yacht on your manifestation list, but you don't really know why you want a yacht because that goddess on the beach has a yacht, then you're going to find yourself on that yacht with all the same issues that you haven't worked on.
And so it was really important for us to have a branch and a name that umbrellas exactly what's happening here, and that's neural manifestation. It's like stairs. When we step up one stair, our lens shifts a little, and then therefore the world shifts around us. And I would say that stepping up the stairs is literally what we're doing through inner child and shadow. I literally feel like that's what we're doing. We're integrating. And each time we step up, our lens is shifting. And therefore, our reality is shifting. And, how to manifest the workshop is just giving us the tools of how to dance with that reality.
So I think to break it down further, it seems that manifestation is we're interacting with the world around us as we perceive it through all of the filters and programming that life has put upon us. But through, self-actualization and the inner work and uncovering some of these filters and removing them, we now can interact with the world around us differently and have more autonomy over how we interact and attract different things around our environment.
If there's anything that I know in my bones is that shadow is the most important part of creating magnetism and manifestation in terms of integrating. Because, when I use the word integrating, I mean that, again, we're kind of integrating into that essence of ourself deeper and deeper. And what that really looks like is letting go of shame and fears and understanding our truest potential and deservingness. That it's like that trifecta is what is magnetism. The beauty of inner child, it helps you refine who you are and heal deeply and really just have a sense of what you actually are worth. And it gives you a sense of your goodness and your truth and who you are. And shadow is like the superpower. If you really want a super speed manifestation, it's the shadow. And that's what shadow's essentially doing. It's like breaking that open in you, that potential that you do have that power and that you can face anything. And in fact, that you are capable of being empowered to shift this trigger that's hitting you and causing you so much pain and causing you so much resistance, that you do have that capability. And when I shift it, when I heal it, I take my power back. And then it's like nothing from that outside environment has control over my inside environment anymore. So that's just one thing I really want to give licensing to everybody listening, that it is so, so powerful. And if there's one thing in unblocking that will get you there faster, it's just recognizing when you're triggered, get to the root of the shadow and take your freedom back from it. Shadow is, I would say, the most important part of unblocking. And that's energetically why you get so far in manifestation when you integrate and heal your shadow. When we get the question, somebody's like, I've reprogrammed everything. I'm totally expanded. I've passed every test. I'm in the magic dark, but nothing's happening. What's up? And we're like, the one last thing you haven't let go of is the need. You're dog paddling still. You're chasing in a way. Yeah. And that form of copying, which we're all guilty of, is chasing. That's all. It's dog paddling. And it actually really has nothing to do with us. It's a huge form of flattery in a way, because they're looking at us, or when we've done it in the past to other people, we're looking at them of like, what's the secret equation that's going to allow me to have what they have that I want? So it's actually really important to look at when something like that's going on. It has nothing to do with the external. Sure, this person can be your expander, but you need to look at and distill down what it is you really dig about them. And this is actually something we've just gotten feedback on a lot. And I actually had this woman from the New York Times who was interviewing me recently, and she came to the speaking tour and she was asking people in the audience in LA, they're like, but I've interviewed X, Y, and Z other people in manifestation who teach it. What's different about her? And they said, she's so authentic. And that's really the truth that we're all witnessing. We're like, what's that secret sauce? It's because they're worthy in their authenticity. And we're actually we're emulating the wrong things rather than distilling it down and being like, what's my worthy full-blown authenticity? And how do I run with every ping that I get about that? That's what's actually going to lead to what we're looking in them for. 3 ways to distill down if something is a test in your life. If you ask yourself these 3 things, you'll get very clear very quickly if it is. 1, have you set a boundary regarding this subject? So something like that could be, let's say you've been calling in your company growing, but you'll no longer do a service you used to offer because you've evolved out of that. So you're only going to do this new type of service, and you'll start to get tested to be like, well, maybe if you do this old one, I'll give you a TV show. Or maybe if you do this old one, it'll be a lot of money. Yeah. And you're like, well, that TV show could, and that's a no, because it's a boundary you've set with yourself. Number 2 is really asking yourself, do I feel embarrassed in any way or shame around this? And so an example of that could look like, you've gone on this date with a suitor that you're calling in, and they don't introduce you to your friends, like to their friends. Let's say you run into all of their friends and they don't even bother to introduce you or acknowledge that you're there. So that makes you feel shame and small. That's a test. Or number 3, do you shrink in any way? So anything about this, does it make you smaller?
For someone who doesn't have clarity on what they desire, if they're going to manifest something and they're unsure, like, I don't even know what I want to desire. I know I have all these blocks and I'm emotionally triggered. So for me, little tiny micro manifestations just to bolster your trust muscle to show that these things are possible. So if you're first starting off manifesting, saying you want to manifest your massive house and you are so far away from getting that home, maybe that's not the first thing you start off with. If you're like brand new to this work and you're really trying to learn how to navigate it, just start off with like a small thing, like a free cup of coffee or, something really tiny. So you can be like, oh, whoa, okay, cool. Like I can do this. This is possible, just to reinforce it. And then we have a clarity DI and a magnetic self DI, which really helps get you more clear on who you are and your desires for things. And that can kind of bring through potentially what you might be desiring next. And then my next advice prescription would be to go and learn your authentic code. Because I think the authentic code is really breaking down, what am I doing in my daily life? How do I bring the essence of me into the actions that I'm taking in my life and really taking inventory of that? And what are those 4 elements?
So that's really good, that advice and all the tools you suggested. One other thing I really like to tell people is like, go down the rabbit holes. If you don't know what you want or whatever, the quickest way is by trying and figuring out what you don't want. So let's say it's career and you're in this career that's been messaged to you, kind of like my brother was. He just fell into it to be safe. And that's what was expected of him. And now he has this opportunity and freedom to be like, who am I? And what do I actually want to do? And I'm always like, one of his passions in high school was to stream. And I didn't even actually know what that was. He had to explain it to me because I feel like I'm getting old. But streaming's like when you play video games live. And he's like, I was so into it right when it was starting and it could have really taken off, but I wasn't allowed to do that. And I was like, go do it now. Follow whatever. And you might stream for like 20 hours and go like, I've grown out of this. This isn't really my thing. And I'm going to wait until the next thing that lights me up, And so wait for that stuff that lights you up. Try it. If you don't want it, now you have a slimmer list of what you don't want. So it's like the more you tailor down what you don't want, you're really going to start to figure out the essence of things you do want. Also, making a list of all of the things that light you up. That was something I kind of did at the end of acting. I was like, I started to notice I would be reading sides for a pilot audition at a raw food restaurant and like feeling like the sides, that's like the papers of what you're going to say, the dialogue. And I would be sitting there feeling like it was homework, like responsibility, when all I wanted to do was Google how raw beets were really good for my body, and I was way more into holistic living. It's something I've always been into, and herbalism and spirituality and self-help. And so I started to make a list and I was like, what are all of the things I love? And I started to write them down. And I was like, well, I still don't have a clear answer, but I do know the direction I can start to head down. So that's where it's like, even if it's in what city do I want to live in? What kind of relationship do I want? How do you want your relationship to feel? Writing those down, it's going to get a little bit closer to the core essence of what your soul's asking for. The authentic self, I talk about this a lot, the higher self, our true self. When you were going through school and you were doing your research, what would you call that scientifically?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that many people would say that energetics is at one end of the spectrum and neuroscience is at the other. And, perhaps that psychology and psychotherapy is closer to neuroscience, but it's still on the spectrum. Whereas everything that you've just said rings completely true to me from the neuroscience research. And so there are psychotherapeutic terms like ego and id and superego, but there isn't necessarily a word for it in neuroscience. But it's all about potential. And as you and I have discussed before, it's about the hope that neuroplasticity gives us. And so it starts off with this idea that our thoughts are more sort of what we call supraconscious, so they're above our level of consciousness and awareness. And our beliefs are more subconscious, but they're intertwined so strongly that you can't separate them. So however much you say, I want to achieve that or I deserve this, if you don't believe it in your subconscious, then there's a misalignment and it can't happen. And you're absolutely right that those sorts of beliefs of not deserving usually come from some sort of childhood trauma or humiliation or shame. And so it's really about understanding that you have the potential and therefore the hope to re-engineer the pathways in your brain to all that full massive potential you had on the day that you were born before anybody started telling you that you couldn't do something or you shouldn't do something. So authentic self is really just the best self that you can be by achieving the potential of your neurons. And the field of epigenetics comes in really strongly here because we always thought that your brain sort of stopped growing at the age of 18 and then you were stuck with what you have, that you were born with the genes that you inherited from your parents, that you can't go against DNA. And the nature and nurture debate has gone swung sort of either way. But now with epigenetics, which is the effect of the environment, the influence of the environment on your genes, it means that certain behaviors and certain thought patterns, which are obviously backed up by subconscious beliefs, can actually switch on and off the expression of certain genes. So things like how long you might live, how likely you are to stay married, how likely you are to become obese, and all sorts of other things are actually much more within your control than we thought before. So I think that so massively backs up all of, everything that you say from an energetics point of view.
Okay, so how does understanding your past help you raise your self-worth? I've been doing the work for about 6 months now, and what I've realized is that I have a really good understanding of my triggers and what is happening in my past to bring me to where I am today, which is a person with hugely low self-esteem due to an alcoholic, abusive parent and instability of traveling as a child and being in 6 different schools. I'm working with a therapist as I've gone into depression this year, and I'm wondering what I'm missing so that my life can change. How does knowing your past and understanding it help you raise your self-worth? Love all of you so much, and congratulations, Lacy, on your pregnancy.
So this is really interesting because I was always the person who, whenever anyone said inner child, I would roll my eyes. I was so judgmental, and it's literally where all of my work was. So I think it's always interesting when we get through it and we realize how much change happens once we kind of have these realizations from doing something like unblock the inner child. But if we think about our childhood, and we know we talk a lot about 0 to 7 and why that's such a crucial time for development. And just the nutshell is it's not really until we're 8 or 9 years old that we can start actually critically thinking. And I was actually reading an article in Stanford Children's Health, and it was saying it's actually not until 12 to 18 that we can do abstract thinking and think about possibilities and form our own ideas or our own questions. So if you consider that, just that piece of information and all of the information that went in our mind before that space, and then also think about all of the information that comes into our mind and that we process as children, that's constantly reinforced by the town we grow up in and our friends and our families. And as children and in our family system, when things are unbalanced, children are amazing because they will always find a way to shape in order to do what they need to do to fit in within their family system. And they'll adjust to their trauma. They'll adjust to the things that are going on so that they can feel safe within a space to whatever degree they need to. So if we have a parent who's an alcoholic or abusive, emotionally, physically, we are going to have a negative association, most likely around being seen. We're going to have a negative association around using our voice or sharing our feelings because it puts attention on us. And we tend to get in trouble when that happens. But we would probably have a positive association to people pleasing or to shrinking ourselves or to being invisible. And that's what we learn we have to be to live in our house. And while that's helpful to us when we're a little kid, think about when you get older and you decide, oh, I want to have my own business, or I want to be in a relationship where I can be emotionally available and open and vulnerable. That's in our conscious mind. But that's only around 12% of our mind. The 88% is that subconscious belief system that's telling us, oh, well, you can't do that because if you do that, this is going to happen. And when you've done that in the past, it's not safe. And even though it was an experience we had as a child, that is our programming that is defining how we show up right now and what is creating our motivation. So it's important to be able to go back into something like Unblocked Inner Child because if we're aware of where we're being held back and what is triggering us, we can go and reshape those memories. And we can even get to the root of that with the trigger DI when we go to the root memory. And slowly we start creating new patterns and new ideas of self. And we release the emotional charge, and it allows us to show up in our life by our own choosing, not by what we were told we had to be.
One other thing I want to add in there too is kind of like the simplest way that I explain it to friends and family who were starting to understand and dive into some of this work is think of your brain like a blueprint, right? And you have this blueprint that's created in your childhood years, and that teaches you how it's going to process. So you have, neural pathways in your brain that are automatic. You see A, you feel B, and you react C. It's just like a loop that goes back and forth. And so you have your blueprint of how your brain operates from a child, but are those stories effective? Yes, they kept you safe as a child, but are they effective now? And if the lessons you learned as a child were, okay, when I do this, mom reacts like this, so this means I'm bad or I'm a bad kid, that may have kept you safe as a child, but is it keeping you safe now? Is it just keeping you small now? And how can you go back in and reframe some of those initial neural pathways and create new ones? Expanders in the magic dark. Even though I have many subconscious blocks that I am now way more aware of and have started working through, expansion in general is something I've never had a problem with. I see and know so many people who show me I can have anything I want and more. So what's going on if I'm super expanded but nothing is coming through? And I mean nothing, not even little things.
If you're super expanded and nothing's coming through, then it's really about unblocking. So there's only 3 things that have to be in motion with manifestation. It's unblocked, expanded, passing tests, which means being in your worth. So if you're super expanded, the 2 things you automatically need to go look at is, am I unblocked enough? And you can only really know that when you're deep down in your subconscious state for this thing. And also, am I in my worth enough? Have I passed the test? Am I being actionable in it? Meaning, anytime we walk through a fear, we create magnetism. So the expander part, you don't have to really look at too much. It's those other 2 things you should be asking yourself, meditating on, looking at. Right now, you might even be listening to this and be like, oh yeah, no, I'm fine, I'm unblocked enough. I'm asking you to meditate on it, because it'll start to present itself, which thing you need to look at and what you need to work through.
There's also sometimes I'll see either other people or like I've had it myself where I'm like, I'm so my worth on this 100%. And then if you like take a step back, you're like, oh, whoa, I still had a little bit more work to do. So like really get honest with yourself and be like, okay, where else do I not feel worthy enough for this?
I see this a lot too. And people, it's so funny when they know this work, they'll like start a job and they'll be like, oh yeah, this position's fine and great, but I should actually be the leader of it, or something. And it's like, that's actually ego. And that's actually a really big indication of low self-worth, because true self-worth looks like humble quietness in a lot of ways. It's taking away that need and being in a space of just knowing you got this, or it's coming, or so getting really honest with yourself is very important. A lot of times, like we would hear this on the speaking tour, somebody would be like, oh, I thought I was really in my worth on this thing. And then I realized, oh yeah, like this happened and I'm really triggered by that still. And I'm not. So it's truly like being honest. And it is that simple. If you look at it, there's 3 components of manifestation. You have to really look and be like, cool, if I have the expanded part, I really need to look at the other things. Or am I truly expanded enough when I look at it on a subconscious level? And we do have inside of the version 2.0 now of the membership platform, we do have a DRE that's literally called expanded. So you can go into a hypnotic state and ask yourself and look if you really are expanded enough.
So helpful. Regret of lost time. I'm struggling with regret around lost time after a devastating breakup and family loss that left me in a rut for years during my 30s. Now I'm ready to move forward and feeling good and manifesting quickly, but I still experience frequent waves of regret and self-blame around lost time. I'm not as far along in life as I would like to be at my age, and I feel this loss even though things are finally moving again. What is going on energetically?
Okay, the first thing that I would say is you're continuing to lose time by spending your time regretting the time that you lost. This is what's familiar to you to a certain degree. So many of us experience this, and I would probably guess the majority of people that you speak to feel like they should be further along in their life. We're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, where they are, how many kids they have, how much money they have, and it's just not productive. So one thing, just for starters, that I always like people to do is reclaim your time in this moment. Start building your day around things that light you up. Implement your authentic code and make every single day look the way that you want your life to feel starting in this moment. It's a great way to push against that, because what happens is so many of us are afraid to actually step into our power. That's why we end up sitting in this moment of regret and looking back, because we're too afraid to move forward. And that's really what's underlying this like lost time, is that you feel like you haven't hit your potential and you're still too afraid to get there. So I would look more into the energetics around that, because your lost time is gone, but you're still losing time by continuing to think about it and to harp on it. So I would just look into how you can shift when that happens. What can you do in this immediate moment to push against that?
And I would look too into, are you procrastinating on something? See if there's a pattern with when your mind starts to lean into the, oh, but I lost time or I'm behind on this. Is that a procrastination tactic? That fear is coming up and you're afraid to really move forward with full force for whatever is calling you?
100%. And I think when people kind of are out of flow, that's the first thing that happens, is they're like, oh, I feel bad about myself. I'm never going to get to where I want to. So they end up pushing things back and procrastinating even more. When in reality, like when I feel like this, I actually wake up and immediately I do something that I don't want to do, whether that's paying a bill, whether I'm really tired and I don't want to work out that day. I almost force that to happen, because then you take that energy of accomplishment through the rest of your day and it gets much easier to keep checking things off of your list.
Trigger versus boundary. I'm an extremely sensitive and intuitive individual, but have difficulty differentiating between a trigger and when something is not right or serving my best self. How do I determine where I can lean in and explore the trigger and when to just say no?
I think this is such an important question. I want you to explore all your triggers, but exploring your triggers does not mean you stay inside of a situation if they are harmful. So if you feel like you're unsafe in a situation or conversation, please get yourself out of there. And when you're back in a safe space, then look at that trigger. What happened? What felt triggering? Have you felt this before? What happened then? When is the first time you felt that way, etc.? Doing the work on our triggers allows us to lose the emotional charge, pull any shadow forward, integrate them, and reprogram. So it is powerful to look at any and all of them, but you don't need to do it in the moment, especially if you feel unsafe. Also, if you're working through certain triggers and it feels too triggering, please seek guidance and support from a coach or a therapist. So explore the triggers. You just need to get yourself out of a situation if it's unsafe or you feel unsafe, and then allow yourself to explore the trigger in a safer space.
I think this one's it's so nuanced, because everyone's level of, okay, this is a boundary for me, or this is a trigger that I can move through, is so different. So it's hard to give like a very specific example for this one, because it's going to be different for each individual.
Well, I kind of had an example, but I wasn't sure if I'm going to share it. So I will share it.
Yeah.
So I was a couple weeks ago, Demi Lovato came out with a story kind of denouncing a yogurt shop or a frozen yogurt shop, because she felt really triggered by the diet language within that, because she is someone who has been through a lot of disordered eating and eating disorders. And, she kind of went on to be like, they're making the unsafe environment. And so I think for her, she felt unsafe in that environment. And that is real. And that is absolutely valid. So she did need to leave that place so that she could get herself to a place where she felt good and safe. But then the extra work would be digging into, why was that so triggering for me? Where can I reprogram? Where can I show up and trust? Where can I la, 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 la? So it's okay if that felt unsafe for her, but for someone else, it wasn't unsafe, right? And they felt good going in there. She needs to own that that was valid for her. And so she can do the work around it. No one else needs to validate you feeling unsafe. If you feel unsafe, you feel unsafe, period, the end. But then you get to deal with it and still process through that trigger, but get yourself into a place that feels safe, and don't put that responsibility on anyone else. Take that for yourself.
I love that, because I think there's so many times where people, they want to make the other person wrong in setting the boundary. Well, this is unsafe for me, so you are wrong. And it's like, okay, well, if we can't control anyone else, how can we make ourselves feel safe? Well, we're going to remove ourselves from the situation, and then we're going to take a deeper look there.
100%.
So I'm quickly interrupting this episode to invite you, if you're ready to start your manifestation journey, or if anything you've heard in our manifestation episodes has piqued your interest to begin. We have a la carte workshops in everything from the basics bundle, which is what we recommend to everyone who starts. It's the formula that actually teaches you how to manifest, unblocked inner child, and unblocked shadow. We also have a la carte workshops on love and money. But the real gem is the Pathway membership because it encompasses every single workshop we have. It's a year-long membership with full access to the few a la carte offerings we have and exclusive workshops not available anywhere else, such as the daily practice, which is what everybody in the Pathway uses, hopefully at least 3 times a week to daily, in order to truly create the new neural pathways that one needs in order to manifest, and houses the library of our deep imaginings, which is our unique hypnosis process that allows you to get into your subconscious and overwrite those old neural pathways, creating the new ones. You can use our special code, EXPANDED, all caps, EXPANDED, to receive $20 off your first a la carte workshop purchase or $20 off your first month of the Pathway. Again, that's all caps, EXPANDED, EXPANDED. Okay, now back to the episode. What's the energetics of when things I want to manifest keep happening, for other people? Like I'm manifesting for other people in a way. And I'm like, are you a Virgo? Because that's actually really weirdly common with Virgos. They amplify those who they're around, their manifestations, which is a real trip. And she started to list some examples. She was like, yeah, I find myself that when they want something, if I just put a little energy into it, they get it, but my things aren't coming through. And it's just such a simple question. I was like, what does your mom do for a living? She was like, she's a stay-at-home mom. I was like, did she put everybody else's needs before hers? Did she see through that everybody else's dreams were happening before hers? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, cool, go do a little reprogramming around that. That's what you imprinted and picked up. It meant to be a woman, and that's why all of us, no matter what we identify with, have some sort of labeling and messaging of what it means to be whatever boxes we've been put in. But at the end of the day, we're all such unique, authentic beings that there is really no way to label any of us. And so when you get down there and you look and you start to really get curious about first you have to take those layers off, right? Of why is my stuff not coming through? So career is the exact same thing. In fact, everything you want to manifest is the exact same energetics. And I always talk about this too. I'm like, energetics of manifestation, they know no labels, right? Whether it's you're older, younger, whatever sex you might be, or any of that, it's all the same energetics. So it's really about those 3 components of whatever circumstance you might be. What is the next step to being more in your worth? No matter how much injustice you're experiencing, what's that very tiny next step I can make that's going to make me more empowered in this situation and take my power back, even if it's tiny. Also looking at what is the messaging I receive that makes me stay in this state of mind, believing that this is all I can have. So that's a really clear example. And the more we can figure out what those are, especially in career, money and love, they're always connected, which I talk about all the time. But in career, the more we can get clear on that, because that is such a loud message in our society of what we need to do and what we need to make in order to be respected and loved.
If you guys are new to the work and you're tuning in for the first time, it sounds like there's a ton of programs and things to do. And you're like, where the heck do I start? I want to do all of this. At least that's how I was when I came to it. Just take it one step at a time and almost let your intuition kind of guide you. How to Manifest gives you the full background on everything that you're going to be kind of covering in this process. And then you can start to unpack and go through all of the different workshops, but just kind of trust your gut and go where that leads you. There's no like right or wrong way to be doing it, but the consistency of doing it, like showing up daily, showing up like when you have those triggers, being able to go in and pop in a DI and see what's coming up really, really has made a huge difference for me in clearing stuff out and then also being able to call stuff in. How to stay in flow. I find that my conscious mind is always trying to find my manifestation. For example, if I'm calling in money, my mind starts thinking, maybe it will come as a raise or bonus at work or a check in the mail, etc. And then when it doesn't come through that way, I'm disappointed. How can I stop looking for the how and be more open to the flow and the magic?
It's so fascinating because I've been practicing this for so long and I'm I'm very specific about how I manifest. Like I write to a T what I want and I would say like 9 out of 10 times it shows up, not in the way, but all the details I was asking for. So for instance, when Max showed up, he was younger than I thought I had imagined I wanted. However, all the details were there. So I'm very specific. But the interesting thing is I'm never attached to how something comes through. And I don't mean it in the superstitious way of manifestation of like, just let go and it'll appear. That's not what I'm talking about at all. Like I recognize that if I unblock, expand, and take any action steps I need to take to be in my worth in ratio to what I'm calling in, like I do all the work around it, I know it's going to come. So I'm never attached to how it comes. So for instance, like the money, I'm asking for money, is it going to come through a raise, through a check in the mail? That's all still pretty superstitious in my opinion. It's like the stuff we've learned through old manifestation books. That's one part I just want to recognize and say, like, let all of that stuff you've taken in as manifestation programming go. Like the check in the mail piece, sure, that might happen once in a while in your life. Yes, it could come through as a raise when you open up a portal or you move some energy. But really at the end of the day, how do you want it to come through? And I don't mean like it's so micro specific that you're controlling how it comes through, but it's like if you really sit down and you meditate and you get into truly your heart space, or you get into like just a happy, gooey energy when you're meditating, and you really ask your authentic self, your authentic code, like, how do I want things to appear in my life? What is the best case scenario? And not out of fear. Like a lot of people will, getting back to the job scenario of asking for money, they'll say, I want it to come through as a raise because I'm afraid of leaving the job that makes me unhappy. So like getting out of all the fear spaces and just really starting to play with that energy in meditation. Like what would be for fun the most ideal ways things can come through for me? That's one thing I would play with, just opening up and expanding your subconscious a little bit more as to how. And then the flow piece. So just like hitting on that flow piece, that how do I keep the flow happening, right? When we get into a momentum and we're manifesting a few things, you're like, I don't want it to stop. I'm in momentum. But the beautiful thing about manifestation, it's like anything else in life. It has a duality, right? It has to contract to expand. Like things have to contract to expand. That's how energy works. There's a light and there's a darkness. One begets the other gets it. So it's also like letting yourself know that there are a few working components that help you manifest, right? If we just boil it down to its simplistic form, it's unblock, expand, and then worth, which is usually actionable. In order for all of those to be in motion simultaneously, because they're three moving parts that, yes, work together, but they also can work very individually, you have to note that there will be times where things are just like moving a little bit more in the unblocking space to open up the expansion, therefore to create the space for stuff to come through. So when people are like, I just want to stay on this flow, that's also like, I just want to be on blow all of the time. Like what goes up has to come down. So it's, I think, honoring that, like everything's an ebb and flow. If you're a woman biologically, you have a complete cycle that's changing all throughout the month. Your manifestation practice can also look the same, because in the human experience on this journey, we're here to learn lessons. We're here to get back into our whole worthy, authentic self. So there's going to be experiences around that momentum sometimes, and then contraction while you're expanding into the next thing to have even greater space than what you could have imagined imagined for the thing before. So there's a lot of ideas in everything I just said, but if you even rewind this and listen to it a few times, I think it can help people understand when you're playing with energetics, like that fluid water motion you're always playing with. It kind of feels like silk and water going through your fingers. Like that's how I think of when I'm reading energetics and playing with it and seeing what components have to move and to expand, et cetera, for people when I was working with them. You're becoming your own energetic reader with this practice. That's why we have a digital space for it. And, we do have coaches you can work with, but that's why we have programs. So you can teach yourself how to become your own reader and how to feel into that fine-tuned energetic playfulness. Even that practice of meditating and getting into your soul's authentic code and asking, like, how would I like this thing that I'm dreaming about to come through that is in alignment with my soul and it isn't out of ego? And we all know what I talk about with ego. I don't mean like detachment. I mean, just like truly, truly what your soul's asking for, regardless of how materialistic or unmaterialistic it is. Understand how to start truly reading and playing with energy so that you're a lot less concerned about how something's going to come through or the flow of it, and really starting to understand the dance in order for things to come through. Really getting in touch with your soul's desire of like, know really what would be the dream of it coming through, the how, and then really starting to play with that energy.
Manifest after a rock bottom. My personal patterning for manifestation is that I only manifest big things after I rock bottom. For example, being broken up with. This makes me feel like I'm not in control of this process. I have to wait for something painful to happen to me. I don't know how to generate my own magnetism. How can I reconcile this?
Okay, so I want to focus on the part where this person says, how do I generate my own magnetism? And Lacy talks about this and, think about a triangle. It's like we need to understand our limiting beliefs and our blocks and start to work through them. We need expanders, and we also need to take action. And the action is a big part of what brings in magnetism. And that's the saying no. That's the surrender. That's the following pings. It's setting boundaries. And I think that it's the jumping off cliffs, the getting out of your comfort zone. So when it's how do you generate your own magnetism, I want this person to be thinking about what was actually happening prior to the rock bottom. I kind of joke around with my clients and say we all have a fast track to magnetism. So even though we should be doing all of the things, right? The no's, the boundary setting, the jumping off cliffs, there's typically one that when you do it, things come quickly. For me, that's definitely surrender because I like control. And so I always have my clients look back to see prior to a manifestation, what were they doing? So that way we can find their own pattern. So my suggestion to this person is to look to see all of these quote unquote rock bottoms that were happening to you. What was your energetics prior to that? Did you actually manifest this rock bottom because you knew that something on the other side of it was going to come? To me, this is all around journal prompts. This is you looking back to see what is my pattern? What are all of the different rock bottoms that I have been through? And what was I doing up into that point? Was I surrendering? Was I saying no? Was I setting boundaries, etc.? Because then you can really start to see what you do to bring things to come in a little bit faster. Again, we should be doing all of the no's and the surrenders and the jumping off of cliffs. It doesn't mean you're going to do it every day, but typically we have one, and I've been able to spot it with most of my clients, one that when you do it, things are going to come in a little bit faster.
What to do while waiting for manifestations. In the podcast, I've heard Lacy say that her big manifestations usually take 1 year and manifesting the forest retreat house took 3 years. But in the Formula in Magnetism, she advises things that are believable between 6 to 9 months. Can you give some examples of what you consider a big manifestation that would take a year or more? And how do you list things that you're manifesting that may take 3 or more years?
Yeah. So personally, as a rule of thumb, especially for beginners, when you're first starting out and watching how to manifest, I really like to include the micro version of it, the 3 to 6 months. But you move from like novice to more advanced to totally advanced through how often you manifest how big are the manifestations become? Therefore, we usually call that developing your trust muscle. And then once the trust muscle is pretty developed, I call in an array, a spectrum of things. So, for instance, I started calling in this Topanga house. I think this took about 4.5 years. I mean, it's been like 10 years in the making, but until it became more and more quasi-believable, about 4.5 years, and especially like getting on the same page with Max because we were co-manifesting together. And, we have education on that as well. But when manifesting together, you really have to be on the same page. You have to be equally as unblocked in whatever each of the person's individual blocks are. You have to each be equally as expanded. So not to go off on a tangent of that, but that took like 4.5 years. However, I've had a very big trust muscle for quite some time. So I feel pretty good about at least putting on my list the bigger things, knowing that I am going to have to do the work and it's going to take time to align with them. But at least the moment we call them in, even if we're nonspecific or specific, the universe is already like that thing's already moving. How do I put the energetics into words? It's like an earthquake's already happening and that thing's starting to orbit. It's kind of like how your aura extends further and further and further. Just to give sort of a picture, that just means that maybe if it's more macro, meaning that you're not as expanded as you need to be for it, you're not as unblocked as you need to be for it, you're not as in your worth as you need to be for it, it might be at the very end of that aura orbiting, and it starts to get closer and closer and closer the more that you align with those things I just talked about. So it really all comes down to how big your trust muscle is. And even as a beginner, if you want to, you can start putting big things on your list soon. However, just knowing, I like to give that frame of reference 3 to 6 months, because those big things will take as long as it takes for you to unblock and expand and be energetically, subconsciously worthy in alignment with its worth. So I use that 3 to 6 months or 6 to 9 months so that people don't get discouraged. They can start to use those smaller milestones of manifesting to develop that trust muscle. You can start with the big stuff first, but making this process as actionable and as non-abstract as possible so that people start to understand their own personal process doing it is of the most importance to me, because results mean everything. When I used to try other new age manifestation and I could never grasp like when something would manifest, how it happened, I think really learning your personal patterning within the structure of a structure is so much more beneficial, because you start to be able to QC what's working for you, what's not, and then really develop your own process around it that can result over and over and over again.
I always say neuroplasticity is going on all the time. Your brain is being molded and shaped by everything that you experience. And that can be for good or it can be for bad. So, if you're numbing, if you're looking at, in quote marks, aspirational images that are unrealistic and not really what you want, completely material and shallow, then that's going to be having a negative impact on your neural pathways. From my point of view, in terms of the brain pathways, that you can act a certain way for some time, but that takes a lot of short-term effort. And so it's tiring and it can lead to things like needing to numb. If you actually do the work and change your neural pathways so that's who you are now, then that's hard work up front, but then afterwards that becomes natural and easier.
This process allows you to have an introspective, deeply healing experience to open you up to be manifesting from your soul and manifesting from literally your authentic, worthy self. To me, it feels like a very slow but fast process of becoming more and more of myself without really noticing it. It happens really organically. I can tell, wow, I've really changed. The biggest markers for me, I think you said that tests are a great example, how you react to tests. It's a great marker for seeing how much you've changed your brain. But for me, it's triggers. if I'm reactive to triggers anymore, if they don't really bother me. That's my big indicator that I can tell. I've done the work up front, the hard work up front, but it's also still slowly working itself out with reinforcement. Thank you so much for tuning into the episode, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, we did. And in case you're not totally ready to join the pathway yet, I wanted to share a few of our free offerings that I'll often suggest to people as a little bit of a blueprint to get them started on their manifestation journey. The first place I like to direct people completely for free is the motivation. You can see it linked below or on our homepage as our testimony library. And it's categorized by different subjects, whether you're calling in career, money, love, wellness, and much more. When you're reading about a member's experience of what they manifested, you're actually seeing to believe and showing your subconscious that that very thing is possible for you. The second place I like to direct people is to the free clarity exercise, which is also linked below. In it, you get to try our own unique hypnosis process, learn about the science, and some journaling prompts. And the best part about this, you'll get a tiny taste of what it's like to go into your hypnotic state, bring your subconscious forward, and create new neural pathways while receiving clarity. And the third thing, if you haven't listened to it on this podcast yet, please go back to the episode titled Manifestation 101, where you'll learn the basics of neural manifestation to truly understand this process. So go ahead and check out those free resources, the motivation, the free clarity exercise, and the episode Manifestation 101, all linked below. And in an effort to make sure to have representation in this process series, go ahead and submit any process testimonials you have, especially to our LGBTQ+ community, our BIPOC, as well as the Ys, which is anyone in the community who is 45 and over. All right, we'll be back next week.